Hey, Peggy Sue, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm good.
Oh, sorry, Matthew. I was greeting Emma as she was walking in.
Ah,
Hey,
hello.
Thanks for being here tonight.
yeah, you bet.
Matthew, thank you for your comments.
Oh, welcome.
Hopefully my answers made sense.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to look through your response that kind of referred me to something else, but it was a good direction. It was perfect for what I needed. Yep.
Perfect.
Hey, Kimberly.
Oh, Kimberly, you're on mute.
Oh, there you go. Thanks, Matthew, for the test.
For the test.
Well, you said hi to me and then it triggered the fact that I was on mute. So I just was giving you credit for being that smart.
It's the teacher in me. You know, I got to give you pop quizzes every once in a while.
Depends on the subject.
No one said they're gonna miss the meeting, so we should have everyone.
Okay, great.
But people might be delayed talking on the Zoom. I'm always late to Zoom meetings. I don't know what it is.
I think people cut it down to the wire when it's on Zoom.
I'm always 5 minutes early, and the person that's like butting into the meeting, I actually prepped the link 10 minutes ago and went, oh, I don't want to sit there that early. Deathly afraid of late.
Do you want me to sign this now?
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hi, Emily.
Hello.
Emily, what did you think of the webinar?
I thought it was good, although I did think to myself, I have spent more time learning about organics now than I have ever about my trash or my recycling. So now I would like to have the same amount of information about my recycling. It was very informative. She did a good job.
Good, I'm glad.
Yeah.
She was saying, she was like, I just wish it was in person. I just like it so much more in person. And I was like, you did so well. It's all right.
Yeah, it's hard when you don't even see people's faces or anything, you know,
Yeah,
like nobody's nodding.
Yeah, I said next time we could do it as like a traditional Zoom meeting that instead of a webinar, but my Green Corps member that I supervised had a organics webinar today.
Nice.
Yeah. So she did a really, really good job.
Yep.
Well, we do have a quorum. Do you want us to wait a couple minutes since it's our first Zoom as a board?
I think you could advance because you have a quorum.
We have a lot going on.
Yeah.
And
Dre just messaged me looking for the Zoom link.
Okay, here's Meg. Hi, Meg. And here's Anna.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
I think, yeah, we might as well start. Dre was looking for the Zoom, so I'm gonna just try to resend that to him.
Okay. Well, I'll call the meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Hopkins Park Board, is being held virtually Pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.021 in response to the COVID-19 emergency. Let me please remind those of you who are on the conference call line to please mute yourselves until you're asked to speak. Also, please identify yourself before you speak. Members of the Park Board who are participating by conference call, please indicate your presence by stating present as I call your names. Vice Chair Slindy,
Present.
Member Palmer,
Present.
Member Waits,
Present.
Member Miller,
Present.
Member Stiley,
Present.
Member Jefferson is on his way. Youth Member Berman,
Who's not going to be here today.
not present today, and Youth Member Batur, not on the call. Also present in council chambers, Chair Figgins and Management Analyst Peggy Sue Imahee-Bean. Members of the Park Board, all votes will be conducted by roll call. So each member's vote on each item will be identified and recorded. Also, if at any time you're not able to hear discussion or one another, please interrupt me so I can indicate so. Also, just a reminder to state your name before you speak so you can be easily identified. All right, with that, let's adopt the agenda. Today is Monday, January 24th.
We've seen a motion to adopt the agenda.
Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move to adopt the agenda.
Okay, that was Member Waits adopting the agenda. Do we have a second?
This is Member Miller, and I will second.
All right. All in favor to adopt the agenda?
I will do a roll call vote.
Okay,
Member Miller,
Aye.
Member Stiley,
Aye.
Member Waits,
Aye.
Vice Chair Slindy,
Aye.
Member Palmer,
Aye.
Chair Figgins,
aye. All right, agenda has been adopted unanimously. At this point, any interested resident may come to speak on an item that is not on this evening's agenda. Do we know if there's a queue or anything, or would community members just pop up?
they would just pop up, but and we did not receive any comment prior to the meeting.
Okay, so we do not have any community comment at this point. So the next item on the agenda is consent agenda, the minutes from the December 13th, 2021 Park Board meeting. Do we have any comments before a motion to approve the December 13 minutes? Do we have a motion to approve the December 13 minutes?
This is Member Miller, and I motion to approve the December 13th minutes.
And do we have a second?
Member Waits, second.
All right, we can take a roll call vote. Member Miller,
Aye.
Member Stiley,
Aye.
Member Waits,
Aye.
Vice Chair Slindy,
Aye.
Member Palmer,
Aye.
Chair Figgins,
Aye. All right, minutes have been approved from December 13th unanimously. Next item is our general business. First on the agenda is review of adopted 2022 Park Board work plan and calendar. We had a big packet this month that was super organized. Peggy Sue, is there anything that you want to mention or an organized way you would like us to have this discussion?
No, Chair Figgins, I just wanted to add this in because this was approved by the the council at their December meeting. So on December, I think 15th, this was approved by the council. Chair Figgins, Vice Chair Slindy was able to present this to very rave reviews. They literally could not stop talking about how happy they were to meet Vice Chair Slindy and to meet someone who wasn't yelling at them. And I think they were very, excited about our work plan. This is really more of just, to bring this ahead of you so that you kind of have a good sense of where we'll go this year. Obviously, this may change. So just, try to be flexible, know that this is approximately when we're going to see things over the next calendar year. And if there's something that's not on there that you want to cover, I can take that request now. Otherwise, as you're thinking about that, just feel free to email me any comments.
Well, I thought it looked great, and thanks to Vice Chair Slindy for stepping up and being our presenter to the City Council. Thanks, Meg.
You bet.
Can I ask a question? This is Member Waits.
Go ahead.
Can you, I wasn't sure if you realized that Member Jefferson was here.
Hi, Dre. Just to fill you in, Dre, we're every time we're making a vote, we're going to just call everybody's names, and then you can yay or nay. And so far, we're just looking at the work plan that we adopted. So, well,
I got you. I've been here for a little bit, so I've seen it.
great. Okay. Any other comments on the work plan? I know we have a lot to dig into tonight.
Just have one quick comment. This is Member Miller. I was just wondering was there any amendment or any changes to what we presented, or the council accepted it as presented?
Member Miller, the council accepted it as presented.
Great, thank you.
All right, next up, review of draft RFP for Master Park System Plan and Implementation Plan.
Great. Well, thank you, Chair Figgins, members of the Park Board. This is kind of the main thing that we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to assume that everyone kind of either has this pulled up on another screen or printed out in front of them. As we talk about this, I'm not going to do a formal presentation just because I think it's a lot to kind of go through in a presentation format. But what you do have in front of you and included in your packet was a request for proposals for services for the City of Hopkins Park System Master Plan. This document is very large. It is 14 pages. Some of it is more technical stuff where we're asking for really particular detailed information from a consultant so that we can score them adequately and so that we can score proposals evenly. The idea is that we should get similar looking documents from every consultant firm. In my email to you, I asked that you kind of focus on a couple of areas if you couldn't get through kind of the whole packet. Again, I know it was one of the biggest packets probably you guys have gotten in a while. So thank you for taking the time. And I thought tonight I did get some comments, between, Friday and tonight's meeting that I resolved with some Park Board members just in terms of clarifying questions. So tonight I figured we would just kind of go through this section by section and people could bring up any questions that they have. I did note in my email and Member Waits voiced their support for this as well, that we might move faster given if the Park Board felt like this was ready. The only reason that I would really recommend that is that we could move the timeline, and that timeline is located on page 9. We'd be able to move the timeline up so that we could maybe start just a bit sooner, kind of assuming that usually from contract execution, it does take a couple of weeks, especially as they start to do that assessment phase before they can really start to get out with the community. So we'd have a little bit more time on that front end for firms to get into that community engagement phase faster. So with that, I'm gonna just start at the beginning. This plan was mostly put together, this RFP was put together mostly by myself, but there were some members of Public Works and Planning who added some things in. We believe that the EDA, so the Economic Development Authority, is actually going to pay for part of this plan. There are some things in here that are really related to the EDA. So they will be giving us some money to also be a part of this plan. Especially the items around public gathering spaces like the artery and downtown and parks. That's kind of an economic development tool. So they will share some of the cost of the plan with us. So on page 2, the purpose statements, that's really why we're doing this plan. So just that overview, I won't read every single one in detail, but this is essentially what the plan must do. So you'll see in that second sentence, the plan must do. So starting here, I'm maybe taking some comments from people. I see that Meg, you have your hand raised, so we could start with you, Member Slindy.
Sorry, I just want you to rewind, and I'm sorry to slow us down, but I am not familiar with the Economic Development Authority. So can you just give me a quick overview on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Member Slindy and members of the Park Board. So the Economic Development Authority is a authority of the city in a similar way to the Housing and Redevelopment Authority, which oversees Dow Towers and the money that goes to that. Our Economic Development Authority oversees TIF funding or the purchase of city-owned property. So if we were to purchase something, that fund would be utilized to purchase it. If we were to sell something, the sale of property would go through the EDA. So it's a function of the city that is really related to economic development. So property, downtown, things like that. And they do have some money. So some money through having TIF agreements and things like that. They are a revenue generation source for the city.
Thanks.
So moving us forward, did anyone have any comments on page 2 on the purpose? So I will say that Member Miller did send in some comments, just wondering on bullet point 4, if we could expand that to adding in the access to nearby municipal park systems. So not just how Minnetonka Parks and Rec serves us, but also how adjacent proximity to adjacent parks, like the park that's right across the street from Harley Hopkins is in Edina Park. So how those park systems also influence our system. And I think that was the only change that we had over email. Any other comments from the board?
We just, oh, sorry.
Sorry. Kimberly, would you like to go first?
Hopefully this is a quick question. Are we just opening that bullet point up, or are we identifying the park systems that we want to see as part of this?
Member Stiley, that bullet point's pretty open. I think it includes Minnetonka, St. Louis Park, and Edina from my perspective, and what we would consider as we're assessing how the system is or is not served by adjacent systems. So I don't think we want to extend past any municipalities that touch our borders with us.
No, I totally agree. I was just checking. Thanks.
Yeah.
Looking at the 5th bullet point, as we're looking at the different demographics of community members, I did notice that race was not mentioned, but it is mentioned in several other areas of the plan. And I would bring to the board that would be something that we would add in here if we're really looking at different demographics. I think that would be important in order to represent our community members of
Yes.
not just culture, but also race.
No, thank you, Chair Figgins. That's an oversight that should be in there.
Are there any other comments on the purpose section of the plan?
All right, so moving forward, what you'll see on pages 2, 3, and the top of 4 really almost all of 4 is really giving firms an idea of what type of community Hopkins is. So there's a bit of a background that identifies what types of park system we currently have, outlines our relationship with Minnetonka, and then kind of has some emerging issues and opportunities. This was a section that if you had time to get to, that is awesome, but was not necessarily imperative for you to get to. But I do want to open it up if anyone had anything that they would change or want to comment on. I know that Vice Chair Slindy asked me via email why individuals who do not participate in group or team sports was identified as a high priority population. And that is because, you know, typically we're going to get that feedback from people who do participate in group sports as naturally kind of as part of this process. We'll also probably have a good history of from Minnetonka and through community ed, kind of how people who are already pretty active in those group or team sports view the park system. So really trying to elevate those users who are typically not coming into our parks. Were there any other comments or questions on this section? Yeah, member.
I have a question, sir. I can't figure out where the little hand is in Zoom. I don't normally use it. So as I read the bottom of page 3, it says, as noted, the current data shows that the vast majority of cities' population of color and immigrant communities, 90% live within rental housing. It just seems then the high priority populations might be a bit duplicative if we say we are focusing on residents who rent, low income residents, people of color and immigrants. I'm wondering if it would make more sense to hone in more on like immigrants, or it just seems like we're like, as that statement is, it's, I don't know if it makes sense to hone in on one of those, or if we focus on renting as part of that renting, it's, you know, we look at that, it just seems, yeah.
Yeah, member Palmer. So the city currently views those as 2 distinct populations. So we like to indicate that most of our residents of color are renters and not homeowners, which I think is pretty important, but that also the vast majority of our community are renters, and renters are typically underrepresented in city processes. Think about this board, there are no renters on this board. Vice Chair Slindy was a renter, right? But there are no renters here. There are, I think, maybe 1 renter on the park board. There are no council members who are renters. So in the past, we have typically seen very low engagement in all city kind of processes with our rental population. And parkland really affects them in a way that's a bit different than single family homes, because they don't have that in their backyards the way that single family homeowners do. So we view those as 2 distinct populations, but I'd be open to the board's interpretation of that. I also see that member Waits has a hand up.
I mean, I have a separate question, so I can
Okay,
wait if
great.
somebody wants to comment on that.
This is Meg Slindy. I admittedly, Anna, I didn't really understand your full question, but is the question around like why we're highlighting the renters, or why we?
It just seems, I mean, we have renters, and then there's, you know, low income people of color and immigrants. But then if you look at the statement above, it just seems, I mean, I certainly don't want to generalize. I'm just, maybe the question is more, you know, is the target audience representative of the entire population, right? So one thing that we don't have here, and Peggy Sue kind of mentioned that, is that we don't have the owners, right? Or the homeowners as a focus. And that's still 40% of our population. So while I am not disagreeing that we obviously want to engage this, it seems like we still should listen to that 40% that are homeowners. So that's, it just, yeah.
Yeah, member Palmer, I think it's a bit confusing. This is, if you jump ahead into engagement, there's some kind of clarification where we're saying that we want that high priority target population, not necessarily that these are the these are the only populations that we care about, but these are the ones that we have
Right.
a higher priority for. This makes the assumption that homeowners are going to be the ones who come to these events regardless, right? So that's what we've seen in the past, is that homeowners are the ones who do show up. So what we're asking for is, as we target community engagement, we don't need to target for homeowners. They are going to show up. They are the most engaged in our community. But as we think about building community engagement strategies that are really inclusive and really take a priority focus on those populations that don't typically show up.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is Member Miller. If I could maybe piggyback on that a little bit. Sorry, Emily, unless you want to go ahead.
I raised my hand before this, while this was still going on. It's for a separate, although perhaps related comments. So go ahead if you want to address this directly.
I just think about community engagement in that repetition of groups that might already be part of it. I noticed in page 5 in community engagement, bullet point so B2, so the meeting and stakeholders, that sports groups were not mentioned in that, but all the other kind of groups were. And I thought that was kind of an important voice that we do get that. But I think you've indicated that those sports organizations are going to be part of it, but maybe that's a point where we can just, if we need to, say that that is a group that would be there, so at least that we're looking for groups who might have a relationship with sports organizations already.
Thank you, Member Miller. I can add that to bullet point 2, because I think you're right. HAL or Hopkins Youth Hockey should be engaged as well.
And maybe, yeah, the baseball too.
Yeah.
Baseball.
Do we feel like we have a comfort level with the high priority populations list?
Member Waits. I think listening to everybody's comments, the difficulty with that section is that, if I'm understanding correctly, it's meant to say, I mean, the section heading is emerging issues and opportunities, but I think what we're trying to say is we want the plan to make sure that it addresses these people who are likely to not be park users. Maybe that needs to be stated more explicitly. Otherwise, I think we all have a feeling perhaps that the people reading this might think that these are the people who we're targeting for the parks plan in general, like the outcome of the parks plan, as opposed to the issues that we should be aware of. But maybe people who read these RFPs are used to this kind of thing, and it isn't maybe as big of a concept to get around for them.
No, Member Waits, I can clarify that sentence in terms of, high priority populations for engagement, to really clarify that that's what we're addressing here.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Good call, Emily.
Member Stiley, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah. Oh, just piggybacking on Member Waits and Member Palmer, I want to throw out an interesting, as we go through it and talk about who doesn't use the parks, when we look at everything in here, I am not a 10-minute walk to a Hopkins Park. So you're not thinking I'm one of the ones who isn't there, but our entire neighborhood, I'm a 10-minute walk to a Minnetonka Park, but I can't get to a Hopkins Park in 10 minutes. And my kids still interact with sports teams and we do a whole bunch of other things, but we are not able to walk to a park. So opening that up, I love what you guys are talking about, because I wouldn't necessarily be who you're thinking about when it comes to not able to get to a park easily.
This is Member Waits. Maybe we could add a bullet point then that said for the 10% of people who are not within walking distance to the parks, because I know that this plan is going to address the potential for new parks. And I think that would be really important.
I agree.
Yeah, I can absolutely add that.
Great point. Thanks for that. Member Waits, I know you had your hand raised earlier. Did you have the time to say what you were thinking?
Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
And Member Miller, I saw you had a hand raised too. Did you have another comment in this section? No. Okay. Does anybody else have any other comments about this section before we move on?
Great. So on pages 4 through 7, this is really the meat of the plan. So if you can think about the scope of services and tasks as sections of the plan, this is the outline kind of what we assume the plan will look like. So the first section on section 5 is assessing the existing conditions and opportunities. So this is where they'll really be looking at our existing assets, really reviewing our infrastructure, measuring that against national park and recreation standards, and really really thinking about community need. The second portion of this plan, which informs kind of all portions, is community engagement. So this is where they'll be meeting with city officials like this board, the city council, meeting with stakeholders and other partners, doing community engagement. We're not overly prescriptive in what that looks like, but we do ask that they hold at least one virtual engagement opportunity, and that they coordinate with the project team. Letter C, this is probably very interesting to this group, which is funding systems, really looking at how the parks are currently funded, how they're staffed, and looking at how our city compares to other municipalities and what mechanisms might be in place to fund the parks. So item 3 is really determining what strategic actions the city must take in order to meet the financial needs of the park system in the future as defined in this new master plan. Letter D is really the actual meat and bones of the plan. So it comes in 2 parts. Part 1 is the system master plan. So this will be the pretty stuff. It will be looking at our system and saying, here's where we would change things. There may be some high level renderings of parks. I really envision this to have a high level rendering of Central Park and what we should do there. And then part 2 is an implementation plan. So really looking at what's planned for in this plan and figuring out how are we going to do it, how should we prioritize it, and how should we phase it according to the budget that we have. I think it's very likely that what we'll see is a very large gap in finances, which is okay. That's the purpose of this plan also, is to identify, how do we fund our parks in the future. So I'm going to pause there, and it looks like a couple of people have their hands raised on parts A through D of the scope of services. A lot of hands.
All right, Member Stiley, do you have your hand raised from the last question? You're good. Okay, Member Palmer, do you have something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we know that we want to receive something, like you mentioned, do we add, is there a rendering here anywhere that we say, right? Like the goal of this is to get, renderings for Central Park, or put something in there like that.
Yeah, Member Palmer, typically the scope of services would be broad like this, and then it would be just
Okay.
the consultant team as we move forward. It gives a little bit more flexibility as we develop the plan.
Cool.
Vice Chair Slindy.
Yeah, as I'm looking at the implementation plan, I'm just selfishly thinking as a park board member how nice that's going to be to have. And I just want to flag or highlight that I know that down below it talks about their interaction with the park board, that they're going to meet with us a few times during this process. But it'd be great to have them really carve out time where we just talk about implementation, and maybe like park board recommendations could be part of the implementation plan, so that we, again, kind of like going toward that other goal we have as a park board of really defining what our role is and what our abilities are. If that can be woven in, I think that would be really helpful for us.
Yeah, Member Cindy, I can add a bullet under implementation plan 1, just something about kind of the role of the park board in implementation.
That sounds perfect.
Member Waits?
Thank you. Oh shoot, I'm sorry. I pressed the space bar and scrolled down my document. So I need to go back to the section B on community engagement. Yep. Since we are being rather prescriptive with the number of times that they meet with city officials, I think I would rather see a little bit more of a higher goal in the community engagement section. Technically, they could get away with only doing 1 virtual engagement, and I don't think that that's enough unless I'm missing something. I think it would be fair to put in some other numbers there, like, 2 in-person events or a virtual engagement, something. There needs to be more than just that 1.
I made a note about that too, Member Waits, and I thought that we could at least change the wording that expressed that the virtual engagement opportunity would be in addition to in-person opportunities, to make it sound more clear that the majority of the community engagement would be in person, and that we're just looking for an opportunity for people to meet virtually if that's their comfort level.
Yeah, Member Waits and Chair Figgins, I can add that addendum to that. And what I would say is typically this is left pretty open-ended again to kind of see what what firms propose. So the idea is that that's also an area where we can see where proposals are better from one another. If one proposer is proposing, 1 or 2 meetings and one proposer is proposing 8, that's and really creative, unique ideas. That's an opportunity for them to kind of set themselves apart. So we can have sort of a minimum expectation if we'd like, but typically this is in other RFPs and the ones that you saw that were attached that kind of had it very vague in that way.
If I could add on to that, to your statements as well, I'm wondering if that using that as the minimum is the right place to leave that, but looking at the scoring rubric, so bottom of page 13, this is a 15-point community engagement portion of this of grading the RFPs, but that language just says community engagement plan is robust and includes multiple engagement techniques. Maybe there's some more description we can put in the rubric to make sure that reviewers are looking at who's exceeding the minimum, or maybe there's some way to do that to make sure that those proposals that are really have a much more robust engagement are scoring higher.
Yeah, Member Miller, I'm just looking through this to thought I added something here.
Yeah,
So
I think
if you look on page 11, at the top of page 11, this is point 3 in approach to service. So we have how the consultant will engage. So this is what they should be sending to us. How will the consultant will engage city staff and officials, community members, and key stakeholders through an engagement process that is inclusive and equitable. This includes providing clear descriptions of proposed outreach methods and engagement tools. Specifically, the consultant should provide innovative and proven solutions for reaching hard to reach populations, such as non-English speakers and our rental community. B, clearly describe the approach and tools intended to be used. Example given: surveys, public forums, workshops, focus groups, etc. C, any costs associated with translation or interpretation should be reflected in the budget. So I think that's where they get a little bit more clarity on what we mean by robust and multiple techniques, as that's outlined there on the top of page 11.
Great, thank you. That, yeah, that makes it clearer for me. I just have one question about process and thinking about grading it. I don't know if we've gotten this far, but do we have a chance to read all of them and then grade them in comparison? Or is this one of those things where you grade each one individually?
Sure, Member Miller, if we want to wait until we get through criteria,
do
then
that,
I can
yeah.
explain how I've envisioned that process, and the park board, I would love your input on how you'd like to do this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Looking at the scope of services, were there any other comments on the scope of services?
I had one question on page 6 about our, the note about our shared recreation with the city of Minnetonka. Is there a way to, for boards, for information for the board, is there a way to pull comparable operation fees for recreation separately so we can kind of compare how that works for other surrounding cities, comparable cities, even though our cost sharing is a little bit different, but it might still give us a good idea of what kind of recreation funding looks like in comparable cities to us, without it impacting how our capital expenditures and operating and maintenance is separate.
Yeah, Chair Figgins, I can, instead of having a note, I can break this into an A and B and separate out recreation from capital expenditures and operating and maintenance, so that we could look at that. I do think that would be helpful just in terms of benchmarking what we currently spend on recreation versus what it would cost if we, for example, operated our own recreation. So yes, I can break that out.
Yeah, even if it's something we don't have plans to use right now, it could come in handy as we have these conversations if it comes up.
Yeah.
More info is good to have.
Yes.
Are there any other comments before we move on to the next section?
All right, so the next section is just guiding documents. If you got to make it this far and how big this document was, then there are some guiding documents here that we would give to the proposers in advance so they can look at this so that they can make their proposals. At the bottom of page 7 is deliverables. So this just talks about what we imagine the plan will look like at the end. What they will physically hand to city staff is a spiral bound version of the plan, as well as any color copies of maps and an electronic version. And then page 8 is inquiries, so how they should plan to ask me any questions about this. So we will only accept questions for a short period of time so that I don't have people constantly asking me questions as they prepare their RFP. At the top of page 9, now this is where we may propose to move things faster. So this is if we have agreement tonight that this plan is, substantially complete, I can make some edits and send it to the board for review. And we could move this to a February 1st issuance. That would move everything up by 1 month and allow us to review proposals at the end of or at the beginning of March. We would then interview consultants that March park board meeting and then execute a contract in April, allowing us to have really all of May to start that engagement, kind of assuming they'll need the rest of April to prepare to do engagement. So it gives us an extra month. I'd love to see us be able to do that and move a little bit faster in terms of being ready to do engagement. But that's ultimately at the discretion of this board. So I'd open that up for any questions or comments. And I see Member Palmer, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just have a question for the group. So in the RFP event, we have that the city council approves it. does this also make sense to have a line item that the park board would approve it too?
Yes, so member Palmer, I'm not sure if you saw my email this morning or this afternoon. So consultant interviews I have at 6:30 p.m. April 25th, 2022. So that is your meeting. So the idea would be at that same meeting, you would also approve, you would select the consultant and recommend that that consultant be selected. So this
Sure.
body
Can we
cannot,
add that line item then?
yes.
Or do we just say board, just park board recommendation? Because I think we need to really start positioning ourselves a bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since this is our first time doing interviews for something like this, can you give us an idea of how many interviews we might have and what kind of time we would have for a discussion to make this decision? Because I did make one note noticing that the city council would be approving it quite quickly after our meeting, and I'm wondering if you could give us an idea of what that might look like from your experience, if that feels like the right amount of time where we can do a quick turnaround, or is this something that we might have a larger discussion on?
Sure. Members of the park board, Chair Figgins, I think that's up to you. If you feel like you would like more time, we can, we could bring it to the second meeting in April or May for the council. I was, really thinking about that spring weather and getting this started. So moving quickly. It's hard to decide to know how many consultants you might interview. You could ultimately as a board choose not to interview anyone if one proposal you had total agreement that one proposal kind of blew everyone out of the water. I would say we'd probably not look to interview every single consultant. I think that's just a lot. And you'll likely be able to tell the better ones from the, out of the stack, what rises to the top. So I think I would look for you to select 2 to 3 proposals that you would like to interview them on. And then that process is really an opportunity for this board to get any clarifying questions out of that firm. If there are, questions you had about their proposal that you didn't quite understand their approach or really wanted to get to know their team, that's where that interview comes in handy. So if the board felt like they could not do interviews and select a team in the same meeting, we could also have interviews as a special park board meeting, and we could select a different date for that. I would leave that up to you.
In your professional opinion, though, you think that it would be realistic to be able to do that all in one meeting?
Yes, Chair Figgins, I do think it would be easy. You would have already scored the proposal. So at this point, it would be kind of helping you decide, ideally, right, between 2 really good proposals based on how the teams interview.
I see a hand raised from member Miller.
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to bring up that the zoning update task force will also be conducting community engagement in, looks like April, May, and possibly June. So there might be a competing field. If we do try to do community engagement at the same time, they'll be most likely trying to engage the same people.
Yeah, member Miller, I think that's a great point. I think that rather than seeing that as like competition, I actually see that as a really big benefit where we might be able to be duplicative in those same events. So perhaps having you as members of the park board being out at those events and talking to people about the upcoming park plan or having our firm doing that. So I think it's a great point. Like there will already be some engagement. And I think, maybe some of the people who are interested in the zoning update may not be people who are typically park users or recreation users. So I would say, that it could be a great opportunity for us to overlap. And I am trying to also be sensitive that we, we kind of never know what COVID will do. So, if you had asked me a year ago, I would have said, we're definitely going to be over this by now. And, we're on Zoom right now. So, my push would be to just make sure we can use as much nice weather as possible. But that is, ultimately your decision.
Member Stiley, do you have a comment?
Yep. Or yes, comment. I happen to know the vice chair over at the Bloomington Park Board, and he said Confluence did an amazing job. I saw Peggy Sue had their RFP from 2019. And then also he suggested HKGI, I believe, Bruce Chamberlain. So just wanted to throw out some feedback from somebody who's been through it in Bloomington in our position and how great it was to work with those two organizations.
Yes, Member Stiley, Confluence is who did the Shakopee plan as well. And I worked with them on all of our park designs for Shakopee, and they are a great firm.
So yeah, Andy, the one that I was talking to, he does school construction, has a school construction business and is on park board. And so I trust him as a resource. I thought I'd just pass along that information to everybody.
Great, thank you. Member Jefferson?
Thank you. So I'm just listening to a lot of the comments and requests for specificity in the plans that the consultants would propose. And I'm just wondering, with some of the notes that Peggy Sue is taking, and I keep thinking about her, I guess, wanting to delineate between the proposals that are being set forth. Do we want to give the consultants the answers to the questions before the test, and say, this is everything you need to include in your plan, and be as specific as you can about these, various items, rather than being able to determine who's most qualified to support our community based on, I guess, a little more vagueness in their ability to read the situation and propose something that we can then evaluate on that merit.
Yeah, so Member Jefferson, I think this RFP does that. So it does that in two ways. So in the scope of services and tasks, that's where we're asking them to really outline what we're looking for them to do. In the submittal requirements, so pages 9, 10, and 11, that's where you get a little bit more detail of exactly what we're looking for. So again, where Member Miller asked for, do we need to be more clear on what engagement techniques? You'll start to see under each of these things, D is how they approach the listed scope of services on those earlier pages, including engagement. E is that project timeline. And then in F, this is something that I'm really happy that we added in here, is some supplemental questions. So where we're really looking for some narrative from each firm on how they would address some key issues. And then the evaluation criteria is really intended to be that these are the answers, the criteria where we're going to score them is the answer, right? So we're really looking for plans that do particular things, and that's what you're going to see on 13 and 14. What this RFP should not do is be so prescriptive that it tells the proposal teams, the consultants, exactly what we're looking for out of a plan. I don't think we know that, right? That's the purpose of the community engagement portion, is that the community kind of co-designs this with us, right? So that there is that flexibility. So, as we select a consultant team, we are looking for someone who's skilled, someone who's done this before, and someone who has innovative ideas that are right for our community. But we also have to understand that this board is only a portion of the community, and that co-design through the engagement is really going to lead a lot of those outcomes. So the RFP has to strike a balance. I think it does a good job of that. If you look at the other the other RFPs that are included of giving a good guide of what we're looking for, but not necessarily outlining, that we want, we want to know exactly how popular pickleball is and how many people go to any one park, and looking for that level of detail. So it tries to strike that balance of saying what we want and how, and going back to that purpose of what the plan must do on page 2, but without, necessarily asking for very, very specific things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not referring to that. I get all that. I'm saying as it relates to how many community engagement events to host, those types of details, and how much park board involvement to have, how many opportunities they would like, to meet with city staff and things of that nature. I think honing in on those items in the initial RFP, I feel like may be detrimental, not detrimental, but maybe a little, make it a little more difficult to differentiate between the plans that are being set forth.
I guess, Member Jefferson, maybe I'm confused. So are you saying that you do want to do that, or you would not like to do that?
I would not like to.
Got it. Okay. Yes. And I think that's where we landed, was that we would leave it more vague, especially in terms of community engagement.
Okay. Well, my internet cut out for about 3 minutes, so I may have missed that.
I'm so sorry.
So I think if I'm understanding the conversation, I think I seconded Member Waits's comment about the point about community engagement, and that the only mention of it was a virtual engagement. And we both thought we want more than just a virtual engagement. But to Member Jefferson's point, a good RFP would already know that we want more than just one virtual engagement, and they would specify the amount of engagement that they would do above and beyond that one virtual engagement. And that would be an identifier that they are someone who is paying attention to those details, and they know what a good community engagement looks like, rather than just saying Hopkins wants us to do 4 engagements, therefore we'll do 4 engagements. Is that correct, Dre? And
Thank you.
Emily,
That's a very
are
good
you
way to
comfortable with
summarize
that too?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I guess this Member Waits, I go back and forth every time I hear somebody talk about it, I feel differently. And I don't think this RFP is about us getting the plan to create the plan, not the plan itself, but it's the plan to create the plan. So when it comes down to our deal breakers, we should be clear about things like how many meetings we're going to have and what the timeline is. And we've done that with many things. There's something when Member Jefferson first started talking, I thought we were going down the road of like, we should say that this should include a very specific plan for Central Park. And I was like, well, actually, that sounds like a good idea too. And then I was convinced that no, that's not that's too far down the road of specifics about what the plan itself should include. But I don't think it makes sense to me to not be clear about some of the things that we're expecting them to do in the creation of the plan for which they're making their proposal.
Sure.
So I would say, I think we should so as far as like those requirements of what we expect them to do in the creation of a plan, I don't think it would be bad to be more specific.
Yeah, and Member Waits, one thing I will say is that you'll see that there's time in the timeline for contract negotiation, between May 3rd and May 13th, we may have changes that we would want to what they have scoped for us. So that's also something to keep in mind. If you decide you really love a firm and their plan looks great, but it doesn't have quite enough community engagement, or it's missing, one piece that you saw in another firms that you'd like to add, in that 10-day period, we can also, and really they'll have more than 10 days, right? Because they'll know we would notify them that we would be bringing that forward to the city council. But we can make those changes at that moment too. So if you really enjoy a firm, but you'd like them to do 8 community engagements events instead of 7, or you saw something very cool in someone else's proposal that you'd like them to also include, you're absolutely able to do that.
Vice Chair Slindy, I see you have a hand raised.
Yeah, I think Peggy Sue just answered it. I was going to ask sort of how much flexibility we have once we select a firm to change things or make changes to what they propose. So I guess I'll further that though. So after the 10 days, how does it work if we want to change something or add something? Is that, in your experience, has that been doable? Are they pretty inflexible? Like, how do these, and then I'm also kind of curious to know, like, once a firm is chosen, what is the first thing they're going to do?
Yeah, those are all great questions, Member Slindy. So after the contract is executed, any changes that we make that result in the addition of work is likely going to come at a cost. So if we at any point decide that we want to add more into the scope, then we would need to likely pay for that outside of what is contracted. If we decide we want to change something or do something differently, firms are pretty flexible, right? Some of this, like, they won't know until they start to get into the assessment that maybe they need to do something differently or try something differently. So I think firms are flexible in amending the scope in a way that's not necessarily adding additional work. As far as what is the next step after the contract is executed, a firm is likely going to go kind of straight into that scope of services A on page 5. So really starting to assess what the opportunities are, be really familiar with our park system, and get to know kind of what start to dig into the like fact finding and data, right? And then from there, they're likely going to come back to this board to give kind of an update of how they're going to approach the plan moving forward. So that's what I would likely look for and they're going to put together a timeline as part of their proposal. So you'll see how every consultant firm approaches that, whether or not they want to come to this board right away, whether or not they want to start to do some assessment and conditions observation first. We'll see that in their timelines.
Thank you. It sounds like we do have a lot of back and forth abilities, like during the negotiation and then even after. So to that end, I guess I would just say I agree with what Chair Jefferson has said, because I think I like the idea of, holding our cards a little closer and seeing what they come up with within reason. And so I think it's a good idea.
Are there any other comments on this topic? Member Waits?
Yeah, I mean, I do still have another question, but on this, did I hear somewhere that we have a 10-day period somewhere to add or clarify? I'm struggling to find this. What did I miss? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, yes, you did hear that correctly. Member Waits, on the top of page 9 in the timeline, I'm just kind of throwing out 10 days because that's, between May 3rd and May 13th is 10 days before we would sign and execute a contract. So there is time between the time that you interview consultants and the contract is executed that you could modify the scope of services that a consultant is proposing.
Okay, then thank you for clarifying that. And that is the perfect segue to my next comment that I wanted to make, which was, I don't feel comfortable with us doing the interviews and making our decision in the same meeting. I see how we do these things. I just don't think it's possible. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case anybody else needed to know that.
So Member Waits, would you be comfortable supporting a special meeting in the month of March or April to accommodate an extra meeting to do interviews?
I would.
Anyone else for or against that?
Member Stiley, I see your hand is up. I see a thumbs up from Member Miller.
I don't want to slow down any timelines. I just want to think ahead with a lot of planning. I agree on the extra meeting. I'm in for a special meeting. I do want to just remind everybody that March is spring break season with kids and whatnot. I would say that if there's any chance we could talk about April, it would probably be less of a scheduling nightmare.
I had a similar concern about spring break, and we've got 2 weeks where we're going to be gone, which is fine. I'm not the linchpin by any means, but it is a consideration.
I'm gone the first 2 weeks of April.
My kids have 2 weeks off of school.
Yeah.
Starting the March 21st-ish. So not that I can't be there or we can't Zoom or whatever. I'm with everybody else. I'm not the linchpin, but you can already see there's a handful of us. So.
So Member Stiley, Member Palmer, so what we're looking at, if we adjust and move forward tonight to release, excuse me, this RFP sooner, is we would be looking at a February 1st issuance, a February 15th deadline to submit written questions, a proposal due date of March 1st. I'd like us to have at least a week of being able to review and grade proposals. So that would be, essentially, March, we could move this up slightly faster of maybe a March 2nd to a March 9th. We could interview then, have that special meeting sometime the week of, March 7th or March 14th, but we will still have a regularly scheduled park board meeting on March 28th. So does that timing work if we had that special meeting perhaps the week of March 14th? I'm seeing nodding heads. Okay. And then we would have our regular meeting on March 28th.
And the 28th is when we would discuss the candidates or the.
Yeah,
what they're
so
called.
yeah, March 28th is when we would make a recommendation to the city council.
Okay, side comment. Is it possible to get a, that won't work. Never mind. I won't be able to attend that. That's on me though. That's fine.
If there was an overwhelming consensus or not a lot of interviewees, would it be possible to make that decision at our special meeting in which we're interviewing?
Yes.
If that means that the board would be present.
Yes, if on the March 14th date, this board felt ready to make a recommendation to the city council, you could absolutely do that. We would just need to add that in the special meeting notice that this board may consider making that recommendation. And you could choose to not decide that on the 28th. So it's up to you. With that special meeting, maybe that just releases the pressure to make that choice and you feel comfortable. Otherwise, you have that 28th as a fail safe. All right. Any other questions on the timetable? All right, so I'm just going to move this forward. So pages 9 through 12 are the submittal requirements. What I will call your attention to is at the bottom of page 11 is some supplemental questions. So these are questions where we're trying to get a little bit better sense of the firm and how they're going to approach this work. So we have a few supplemental questions. So one is, how will you design and implement an equity-driven planning process to ensure that those often left out of the planning process, such as the rental community, immigrants, and BIPOC residents are included? And how will their recommendations help shape an equity-driven master plan and implementation plan? Question 2 is, adaptation to climate change and resiliency are a priority of the city. How will that be identified through the planning process and incorporated into the master plan and implementation plan? Question 3, the city of Hopkins is not the recreational programming provider for the park system, and operation is done with limited financial and staffing capacity. How will you factor this into the planning process while still striving for the highest quality park system for our residents? Question 4, when looking at our park facilities and limited park development fund opportunity, how will you develop a sustainable model for ongoing redevelopment of our built assets? And question 5, this question is added by the EDA. Hopkins has unique urban public spaces, including the Artery, Clock Tower Plaza, and the Hopkins Center for the Arts Plaza, and the future downtown Hopkins Light Rail Station Plaza. How will you approach planning for these public spaces to meet several city goals, including providing flexible gathering areas, fostering creative placemaking, drawing visitors, and supporting downtown businesses? Does anyone have any comments on those 5 questions? All right. So then moving forward, there's some instructions for consultant teams on how they should submit their proposals. And then finally, we get to the evaluation criteria. So if you read through the whole proposal, which I did not expect any of you to do, you will notice that what I've asked them to do is submit an electronic copy, 9 flash drives, so 1 for each of you and 1 for myself, that only has their proposal, their technical proposal. Then they will submit another flash drive that includes both the technical proposal and the cost. So what I would like for this board to do would be to grade everyone based simply on their proposal without factoring in budget. And then budget may also help be a tiebreaker as we discuss firms and select who to interview. So what you'll see in pages 13 and 14, wow, I should really get new glasses. In pages 13 and 14 is the evaluation criteria. So this is the rubric on which we would score. We can do this one of 2 ways. We can do an all or nothing that typically isn't going to give you that, like, you know, those minor point variations between firms, but it is just helpful in determining if someone should really move forward or not. If they're missing a key component of something, that's going to put them straight to the bottom. But one thing that I've added into this proposal is something which is a minimum equity score. So if you look under equity, there are 4 questions which total 55 points, 60 points, 60 points. And then we ask that consultant firms hit a minimum of 35 points. So those 5 criteria are that specific tactics are proposed to target high priority populations and create a document which is representative of this feedback. So that one, to me, seems non-negotiable. It seemed like an easy way to get 15 of the 35 points. Project team has considered ways to compensate some community members for time and expertise, which can be 10 points. Project team can provide examples working with diverse populations in relevant projects. So both of those, I feel, you know, my staff recommendation would be like all 3 of those first ones are ones where teams would need to score all of the points. And then there are 2 areas where they could score extra points and really set themselves apart. So one would be that they are certified as a DBE, or they have a subcontractor who is certified as a DBE. So that's a DBE is a program that the state of Minnesota operates for diverse business contracting. So women-owned or minority-owned businesses. So they would need to be budgeted for at least 50% of the work plan. So they couldn't get this by just adding in a subcontractor who is a minority-owned business for 5 hours on the project. They need to be equally sharing that work. Or that the project team has members who speak Spanish, Somali, or another East African language, which is prevalent in Hopkins, and that points will not be budgeted for if only an interpreter or translator service is provided for. So again, translation services to me are going to be very imperative to this plan. So they won't get points for that, but they could get additional points if they did have a team member who spoke one of our common languages here. In terms of everything else that's in the rubric, it's sort of very similar to the scope of services. So there's an approach and understanding, community engagement, equity, experience, and then the budget. So when you first grade these, you'll do this without the budget questions, and then you will see the budget, and that may help you make some tough choices. So with that, I'd open that this section to any questions.
Member Miller?
Thank you. I don't have any questions with the criteria, but I do have some concerns about the points. As I'm looking at the second item under approaching and understanding, the acknowledgement of future trends and issues, including included in proposal, experiencing planning of these issues, clear processes identified, is only given 5 points. But I feel like that's a really important thing as we're looking for innovation and how this plan would address future trends. We're such a turning point in our city. And the 3, 4, 5, I'm sorry, 1, 2, the third one down under community engagement. A process is identified to work with staff, stakeholders, appointed and elected officials. I think we talked about how important that was in our process, and that's only given 5 points. So I was wondering if we could maybe have higher points to those 2 specific ones.
Sure. So Member Miller, I think the lowest amount of points are areas where it's imperative. It makes a little, it doesn't make the most sense. It's not intuitive is what I would say. So areas where it's going to be obligatory for them to score those points have lower points versus areas where you might have a little bit bigger gap of understanding. So that's how this is, how I've constructed the criteria. So I think it's, it's obligatory that they would have a process to identify, to work with staff, stakeholders, and appointed elected officials. We shouldn't see room between proposals where firms do or don't do that. So it's lower scoring than, say, the ability to understand the opportunities and the desired outcomes, where we may see more variation between firms. Does that make sense? So that's where you see the bigger numbers kind of associated with something where we might see just a little bit less understanding between firms.
My concern is that we are then judging the firms and not the plan. And if we're going to use this scoring rubric as a way to elevate one proposal to another, I'm worried that we would not be able to score a really innovative plan that is unique to Hopkins and has a very promising future as high as that might come from an underdeveloped team and become from a smaller team. And I think that would be a great imbalance to us.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And I think at the end of the day, the point totals are really minimal. So we can make any changes that the board would like to see.
Member Miller, do you have a suggested point change for that section that you're willing to suggest?
Yeah, I think that I think both should be increased by 5 so that they are 10.
And Member Miller, that was acknowledgement of future trends. And then can you remind me of the second one, the process to work with the elected officials?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody who's uncomfortable with those changes? Member Waits, I see your hand up.
A couple of minor things, and I had a thought while Member Miller was talking about that and the explanation from Peggy Sue, which is, would it be possible or allowed in this kind of thing to have a section that, these are the things, it's more like a check, yes or no. Does it have these things? Is there a plan? Of those things that I understand what you're saying, Peggy Sue, like these are the things, the low point things are the things that better be in all the plans.
Correct.
Well, why are we scoring those? Why don't we just say yes or no, they're in there, so that then we can actually really think more analytically about those more creative, interesting things. Because my worry kind of this, and maybe I'm worried this is a lot of detail, and I just scored for a thing at work using a 3-question rubric, And it takes a long time. And I'm just worried that by the time we get down to question like 47, we're not going to be thinking as clearly maybe. And I wonder if maybe this might just have a secondary feature of making it a little bit easier for us to really focus on things that are important.
So are you suggesting some sort of pass-fail type scoring for some of these items?
And possibly either maybe they don't, yes, a pass fail, and not to suggest that they would entirely pass or fail if they did or did not have all those things, but that it's a non-scored, yes, pass fail section. I had another question, and if I can find this out, it might also help me think about this better, which is for this kind of a rubric, like for the first one, there's 10 points. Is it 0 or 10, or is there a scale where we can say they got 5 points?
So remember weights originally, the plan was sort of, it is pass fail, sort of you either get the 10 points or you don't get the 10 points. And so that's again why it's with the lower points, right? You either can do something or you can't. So it's up to this board how they prefer to score it. I think I got the sense early on that people would like to be able to maybe score a 7 rather than a 10. So ultimately that's your decision. But the idea would be that it's all or nothing. You can either earn all of your points or not earn all of your points.
I think I understand then how you came to this system. I think it could work either way, honestly.
Piggybacking off of what Emily and Matthew mentioned, I think it might make more sense even to differentiate it between the actual plan and the project team. Like if we look at the equity one, the last one, the project team has members who speak Spanish, Somali, or Eastern African language. Would that be desired? Yes, like it would, that is our population, but is an interpreter enough for that? Like, again, just trying to, it seems like a stretch. So in the equity ones, the yes, no, again, it's kind of who they are versus the plan they would provide. So.
I'm going to piggyback off member weights and say that if we have a scale of 0 to 10, but it's either all the points or none of the points, and I can't give them a 7, then it's essentially a pass fail anyway. So I would go with member weights and say, I mean, I hear you, Peggy Sue, and I agree, like there are some they just have to have. So then make those a yes, no. And I want to concur with member Miller, and I think this is what I'm hearing is that some of them, like, yes, it's great if there's somebody on their team that would speak different languages, but there is something, it's more prohibitive to get a small firm up and coming creative that might not have that, but could absolutely serve what we're looking for. So, I think that the plan is really, I mean, that's focusing on, I like focusing on the innovation and focusing on where we're going and focusing on the plan. And I'm all in support of putting a couple of them that you can either get 0 or 10 as pass fail, instead of like, if I can't give them a 7, then don't give me the option, is sort of where I'm at.
So members of the park board, what I'm hearing is that you'd like to select out the ones where it is a yes or no option, and separate from those the ones that you'd like to be able to score. So I think maybe what might be the easiest for us is to go through each of these and determine which ones we need the yes or the no on, and which ones you'd like to have that scoring range. But before we do that, I see some hands still raised. Anna and member Palmer and member Stiley, do you have more you want to add? Okay. Member Jefferson, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so I guess I'm an advocate of going with a scoring system that allows to, I guess, parcel out the points a little bit more. So if I can give you, I think pass fail, again, makes it very difficult to differentiate between the proposals. I think the expectation that I have is that for the most part, we're going to be, choosing between very qualified individuals. So, people who can't look at this list and make sure they touch all those points, even in a very, surface level way, are going to be easy to identify and, be kind of thrown by the wayside pretty quickly. But I think choosing between the best option and a good option could be the difference between giving someone 12 out of 15 versus 13 out of 15, when it comes to like making the best decision. Because how do you even determine, like, in my, as I'm thinking out loud, it's like the work plan is realistic and identifies specific goals, strategies, and timeline. Like, there's a lot of different components to this plan. So it's like there may be pieces of it that don't fit Hopkins, but there may be pieces of it that are really compelling. And so it's like, how do you pass fail that? Like, I think there should be, for the good of the group, even the groups presenting, like being able to score them according to how we feel makes a little more sense to me when it comes to differentiating at the end.
Yeah, that's absolutely an option, would be to maintain the scoring system, but choose to score on a range of 0 to 10 or 0 to whichever the point score is listed here, and then just make those changes of how many points are able to be earned in the categories that Member Miller suggested. I see that you have your hand raised again, Member Waits.
I do, because I needed to hear the explanations and everybody's discussion to think about this for a minute. And I mean, essentially, all of these questions are pass fail, and what the points do is they weight the answers. So I don't think that we should get, I would like to propose that we don't necessarily get hung up in how we do the scoring, but we make sure that we agree. If we were to line the, let's say we put these all, took them out of the categories and ranked and sorted them by number of points, are the ones at the top with the 15 points the most important, and the ones with the 5, the that I think that's what I think what has been done here.
Yes.
And I think that we could probably talk about this all day long. And we're all going to have different opinions. And when it comes down in this initial stage, and we could probably change our own opinions the next day, and then the next day after that. And when it really comes down to us sitting with these proposals in our hand, I think it'll become clear that, there's just no perfect way to use a rubric like this. I know rubrics are meant to be designed to be an exact representation of what you're looking for, but then you see the actual answers. And what I think clearly understands the opportunities and desired outcome of the products might not be, not everybody may agree with that. So I'm very wary of getting into the nitty gritty of a point here and a point there. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one's ever used a rubric, but this is a rabbit hole. Like, I mean, if you guys are concerned about finding time to have an extra hour meeting, this is going to be like hours of work to go through these proposals and to use a rubric like this if it gets any more complex than it is. So I think I think we might be best served by being clear on how these are weighted, and let the chips fall where they may beyond that, because it's going to be a lot of different people looking at these proposals at the end of the day.
I'd like to comment that in professional settings where I've used rubrics, the key part about a rubric is that as long as each individual is filling out their rubrics in a consistent way, it doesn't matter if I'm scoring people if I'm scoring RFPs in the same way that somebody else is scoring RFPs, as long as I'm scoring all of my RFPs in a consistent way, then when we bring our RFPs rubrics together, we're able to average them out. And I think having wiggle room for us to score on a scale rather than an all or nothing scenario will allow us as individuals to score the RFPs in a way that makes sense to us. And ultimately, when we bring them all together, if as individuals we're consistent, then the scores will be accurate scores when we bring them all together. But also as a board, it sounds like we have the power to choose how many RFPs from the top of the scores that we want to interview. So if there is a really strong feeling that maybe somebody didn't score as high, but they have that, it factor innovation, or they're not developed as much as maybe one of the big companies, like I think Member Miller mentioned. As a board, I think we have the ability to say, well, maybe we do want to interview the top 3 firms. Maybe we want to interview the top couple firms in order to include some of those firms. But if they're scoring so low that they're not hitting a point area where they're at the top of the pile, we probably don't want to interview them anyway. So I think that's also something that once we're interviewing, we're not going by the point scale anymore. The points are to get you to the interview. And once they're interviewing, we get to use that gut feeling and what we're actually looking for as a board that might not be scoreable as points. So I think that gives me comfort knowing that if they're good enough to get the points to make an interview, then we can make those decisions as a board through discussions. Member Stiley, I see your hand up.
I just want to clarify, I don't think that we should go to a pass fail on all of them, but if there are some at the top, I agree with everybody. This is going to be a beast, right? And we're going to be scoring things and whatnot. From what I heard at the beginning of this was these 15 points or this set of points, you either get them or you don't. So you get 15 right away because you have to get it. Well, if that's what we're doing with the first X number of questions is it's an all or none, then can't we take the top 3 or 4 or whatever it was we're referring to as you have to get these and go pass fail so that we can really focus on the other ones that we can spend time thinking about. Is it a 0? Is it a 5? Is it a 3? Is it how are we scoring these? Do we have to do all of them on a scale, or can we do the ones where you either pass or you're out of the running as pass fail, and then the rest of them on the point scale?
Member Stiley, we could, I think, just for the sake of not physically having to change this entire rubric, I think it's going to be easy to decide if something deserves 0 or 5 points in the same way that you would either pass or fail it. So, my recommendation would be to stick to one method of how you're going to score this. It's going to be easier for teams to understand. And I would think, if you're going to give something a yes or a no on something that's similar to giving them a 0 or a 5. So you can make that same decision.
Member Miller.
Thank you. I had one of the things I think I wanted to make sure I understood was that the grading and the use of the rubric is not going to just be the park board members, but I understand there's going to be city staff and others. So there will be a group that, how would we incorporate their really qualitative analysis of reviews if we don't have a really kind of detailed rubric? Maybe you could describe that process a little bit more about how this is going to be used and how those scores can be brought together. And in addition to that, Peggy Sue, if you could just add from your experience, how many of these grants do you think we'd actually get? How many proposals will we get? What are we looking at in terms of what might be the workload?
Yeah, Member Miller, members of the park board, there will be staff reviewing these proposals as well because it does impact their work. So at a minimum, myself, the city, the public works director, and then some planning staff will be reviewing these. Again, because they are paying for part of this plan too, they have some degree of input on what that will look like. So there will be some staff and the park board. I would expect that staff, if they're available, would also want to attend the interviewing process so that they could, meet the consultant firms as well. So yes, you are correct. There will be some staff involved. And then, from there, I would think we would just kind of take it, across the board, looking at everyone's scores, who the top couple of firms might be and whether or not we want to interview all of them. So I would likely, look forward to the scoring and then take maybe the top 3 or 4 and ask this, group, do you want to interview 3 or do you want to interview 4? Do you want to interview 2? And that's really going to depend. I can't guess on what that will look like until I kind of see how far apart scores might be for each firm. In terms of how many proposers we might have, that's also really hard for me to know. This plan is going to be really cool and really fun. I could see us getting, half a dozen proposals. I think off the top of my head, I can think of 4 firms that are probably likely to apply regardless. But we could get 1 proposal. You never really know with what these look like, and especially what firms' workloads look like as we look out into the summer, how busy firms might be to be able to take on this work. So it's going to be, I don't quite know, I can't guess what that's going to look like.
Member Waits?
Thank you. 2 things. One is I was inspired by actually what Chair Figgins was talking about as far as how the scoring really matters from each individual scorer. And so it looks to me like I don't think there's anything here in this document that says that the scoring must be done a certain way or that we would only interview people who had the top score. Is that correct? There isn't any requirement that we use the score for any of our decisions?
So there is, it says a short list of consultants will be created from the top ranked proposals. On page 13, right above the.
Oh, okay.
It does not say how many though. So
No, yeah.
My other
so if there was
comment.
somebody that was number 4, we could say we want to interview the top 4.
Okay.
That is a choice we could make.
Yes.
Just a minor comment is I believe in that bolded sentence, a minimum equity score of 35 points. I think that equity should be capitalized. I did not understand what you were referring to originally.
Yeah.
I think that would help.
Yep. Thank you for that catch. You look at a document so long, it's just, you hope for the best after 14 pages.
Member Stiley, do you have a hand up?
Yes, I'm not very good at these emojis. I'm assuming that we have to put it out somewhere in regards to, I'm hearing you say application. Now, I guess I'm used to working for a more private type company. So I have solicited responses for an RFP before. Will we be, and that's, I guess, why I shared earlier the different companies. I would have gone out and done some research. Wow, that was not articulate. And ask them to submit proposals. Do we do any of that? Is there like a balance between our soliciting people and putting it to in a public place? Or I mean,
yeah, So, Member Stiley, the proposal will be listed on the city's website under our RFPs, where we list our available RFPs. And then I will send it out to landscape architecture firms. So I will select a list of firms that I would send it out to and give them, notify them that this RFP is open. And then, you're welcome as members of this board to advertise it. Like, I'll likely throw it on my LinkedIn, for example, that we're accepting RFPs. So we will do kind of a mix of the minimum is that we need to post it on the city's website, but then also some promotion to firms.
Are there any other comments or questions about the rubric?
So members of the park board, what I'm hearing is that we'd like to leave it as a point scale and then also have the ability for the full range of points from 0 to whatever the top points list is. I will put together a scoring rubric for each of you as the time comes closer so that you can kind of just fill something in. You won't need to keep notes on your own to make this process a little bit easier. So it'll have the firm name and then the points possible in every single category. And Member Miller asked earlier in the evening, would we be scoring kind of across proposals or just independently of each proposal? I would really recommend that you first score independently of each proposal. And then as you score, I think it's only natural that you'll think that, perhaps one firm did something better than another and adjust your scores accordingly. But I would ask that you kind of first do that first, passive scoring kind of, each proposal independently. And then as you start to rank them for yourself, you can go back and adjust scores as necessary.
I have a quick question. This is Meg. Is it possible that we only get one response? And if so, is there anything we would do in that case, or?
Vice Chair Slindy, that's a great question. We could ultimately decide that one proposal is amazing. We could also extend the request for proposals if we only got one. So I would look to this board likely to take my recommendation on that. If it is like an amazing proposal and I think you guys are going to love it and it meets all of what we need, perhaps I would recommend that we just move forward with that one proposal. I would not like to be in that situation. So we would likely extend that deadline. That might indicate to me, I would probably reach out to firms who didn't propose and see if it was that they needed more time or if they weren't interested. If firms came back and said they weren't interested and that's why they didn't propose, then perhaps we would want to just move forward with that one proposal or make changes to the RFP or extend the RFP. I think we will deal with that situation if we get there. Hopefully we don't. So with that, I have no further, we're at the end of the proposal. I think I'd love to know if any members of the park board have any further suggested edits or changes or how we feel about this proposal tonight.
I think that the proposal came to us in such a well-organized and specific, basically complete minus a couple little wording things way. And I think Peggy Sue and the team did a great job putting this together. And I'm comfortable voting for the approval of this proposal tonight if the rest of the board is on the same page.
Is that a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the request for proposals with the amendments discussed.
And I would second. This is Member Miller.
Okay, so we'll do a roll call approval. Vice Chair Slindy.
Aye.
Member Palmer. Member Jefferson,
Aye.
Member Waits,
Aye.
Member Stiley.
I,
That's a unanimous approval. Yay,
Yay.
good
Well,
job, everybody.
Thank you for looking through all 1 million pages of this. I'm very impressed with you all.
All right. Next on the list, prepare and discuss annual meeting and chair/vice chair assignments.
Yes, thank you, Chair Figgins. I think this was something that we will have our annual meeting next month, and per the updated bylaws that we updated this last summer, we will actually switch chair and vice chair at our annual meeting in February, rather than doing that when new members join in July. Chair Figgins wanted to start this conversation now in terms of if there was anyone who was interested in taking on that new leadership. We'd be looking for people who are not leaving, so people who will be having more terms ahead of them. But this gives a bit of time for overlap that you can kind of rely on the past chair and vice chair for assistance. Vice Chair Slindy does have, I think, a full term ahead of her. So if it was of interest to you, you could take that chair spot, and then we could have someone else move ahead as a vice chair. Or if other people were interested in having that higher spot, we wouldn't be voting on that tonight, but just giving some space for you all to discuss that tonight before you vote on it next month.
I'll say that I really like this change because having all of the new members coming in and then asking them immediately to vote somebody into the chair position that they just met 10 minutes ago is not the best informed voting decision. So I think this is a really great time for us to do this now that we've gotten to know each other a bit throughout these meetings. And my term will be up in June, so we would be looking for 2 members to step into these leadership positions. And I think it's a little less daunting to randomly say that you want somebody to be the chair if they haven't expressed if they're interested in that leadership position, because we know with the leadership position there are additional responsibilities, and some people are qualified for that but are not looking for that leadership opportunity. So I think having this discussion and having people express their interest in that makes the process a little bit smoother. Member Waits, I see your hand up.
I wanted to ask if Vice Chair Slindy was interested in taking on the chair role.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in it. I just want to double check on my term. To be honest, I've been on it for a while, so I know I'm in my second term. And I think I have a full year. I know I have a full year left. So if we're just looking at a 1-year time slot, I would love to do it. But if we are looking for more than that, I'm not sure how much time I actually have left. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that, but I don't know.
It is June 30, 2023 is your term according to the website.
Oh, okay. Well, if that's enough time, then I'm interested, but I would also invite anyone else who's interested. I don't want that to deter anyone else.
Chair Slindy, these roles are voted on, or Vice Chair Slindy, these are voted on annually. So it would not be a problem that you have only 1 year left in your term.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
Member Miller.
Can we define the roles? I don't know them very well. I don't even know what exactly is entailed in either one of the roles.
Yeah, thank you, Member Miller. If you look in your board and commission handbook, that's where you're going to see a full description. But the ultimate role of the chair is to lead meetings and run meetings. They're also the person who interfaces with the city council during the work plan and at any other times where that would be necessary. And then the vice chair is the fill-in for the chair. So for example, tonight, because we're under emergency order, Chair Figgins needed to be here in person because we need one member of the park board to be in person. Had she not been able to join us, Vice Chair Slindy would have been asked to come tonight and be in person.
So maybe Chair Figgins, you could give a little bit more, like was it actually like for you? How much time, extra commitment was it? What are the challenges, or
Sure.
maybe just more insight into that?
Sure. So I'm currently the chair, and before that I was the vice chair. So I've had a little experience in both roles. As the vice chair, it was primarily be ready to step in to lead a meeting or attend a city council meeting or an event. I know as the vice chair, I was on the comprehensive plan committee. That was something that I stepped up to do because the chair was unable to be a part of that. And they did want park board members on that. Like Peggy Sue said, Meg was able to jump in and be at that city council meeting that I was unable to attend in presenting them our 2022 plan. So vice chair, I would say, is a pretty low responsibility job. If you want to jump in and be the leader, that would be a pretty low commitment role, but still very important. Especially, council said they loved seeing Meg at the meeting. It was really important that somebody was able to represent us there. So that's a little bit about the vice chair. As the chair role, I would say I have met with Peggy Sue before a meeting. So a little bit of extra email communication about agendas or thoughts I've been able to send to her. Not a whole lot of extra homework before a meeting besides just committing to read the whole RFP, be familiar with the agenda. For example, tonight with this remote meeting, I'm here in person, but there was also some extra protocol that I had to read at the beginning of the meeting. So as the chairperson, I do make sure that I'm much more familiar with the agenda and what's going on. I take some extra notes than I did when I was just a member that was showing up, where I'm kind of part of the discussion in the moment, where as a chairperson, I want to feel like I'm a little more prepared. I do sign the minutes, so I read those extra carefully before signing those. Anything else I'm missing?
Yeah, the idea of the chair is really to lead the meeting. So you typically are the last to speak on an issue. You're really trying to facilitate the movement of the other board members to be able to speak as well, which I think Emma does a great job of. So really just making sure everyone is heard before you weigh in. At the end of the day, you're still a member of the same as everyone else, but you are here, facilitating those meetings and making sure things move forward and that you're prepared to do so.
And I think to add on to that, in the moment, I'm keeping track of time in a way where I might have to initiate a vote or tabling a discussion or trying to wrap up a topic to move on, or making sure that everybody's voice was heard before we move on. So a little bit of meeting management, but I think Peggy Sue made a great point that as the chair, I'm not trying to be the loudest person, but I'm trying to make sure that everybody's able to participate. And I think that make sure that the full board is being heard and everybody feels valued. I think that's important for a board culture. Yep. Yeah. Member Stiley?
I I was just going to say that, I mean, I think that Member Slindy, as it was great for you showing up at the meeting, the council meeting, and taking that on. And I'm definitely super supportive there. And I just wanted to say thank you for doing that. And I'm glad that your term is up until 2023. I'm definitely super excited about the board and whatnot. So that vice chair position, especially with Member Slindy around, is something that absolutely interests me. So.
Is there anyone else who's interested in either of those two roles? We're not making a decision tonight, so it's really just trying to have that sense of if people are interested.
Well, I would ask that if anybody ponders on it and they think actually one of these roles might be right for me, please feel free to send that information out to Peggy Sue via email between our now and our next meeting. And that will be something that we're able to do when we meet in February.
Yep, in February, we'll call for nominations. So members can nominate themselves or someone else on the board to fill those roles, and then we'll take a vote on it at that time.
All right, general perk update. Number 1 is warming house hours.
So members of the park board, I just have 2 quick updates from the city of Minnetonka. So first, you may have seen this on Facebook, but warming house hours have been cut Monday through Friday. So those weekday hours at most of the parks, and that is due to just a lack of staffing. They're just really not able to fit those, fill those spaces. And they've also seen just a real lack of skaters as well. So Central Park and the Pavilion is always a warming house, you know, at all times. So if people are looking for somewhere to skate during the day, we really recommend that they look there. But there are some reduced hours. So I encourage you to check out the Facebook page and then pass that along to your neighbors that there are some reduced hours. And the second thing is Minnetonka did just mention that they're already starting to think about Shady Oak Beach. And you know, hiring out at Shady Oak Beach. So if you know someone who might want a summertime job there, just, you know, keep your eye out for that. That's all I have.
All right, any questions about those items before moving on to park area assignment reports?
Peggy Sue, I'd like to make a comment about Shady Oak Beach, and I don't think it'll change anything, but I think everyone agrees that Shady Oak Beach is not open for long enough in the summer. So if that's part of the discussion, it'd be great to see it either open earlier in the summer or stay open later in the summer.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I can pass the feedback on, and I will say, you know, the last community I worked with, we had an aquatic facility, an outdoor aquatic facility, and the challenge is labor. It's that exact thing right there, which is most of the labor is college students or high school students, and so you're relying on those kids to open and close the facility, which makes it really, really hard to stay open longer. So I'm happy to pass that on to Minnetonka, but I want to preface that the labor is the problem, just because it is a seasonal facility.
Gotta be a squeaky wheel. So
No, I appreciate it. I'm happy to pass that on.
All right, we'll move on to park area assignment reports. I have nothing to report on my parks. I am going to name everybody off and you can say nothing to report, or if you have something to report, please let us know. Vice Chair Slindy.
Nothing to report other than just it's cool that Meitzold Field kind of turns into the toddler sledding hill on the side there of 12th Avenue. It's something I never knew. So very popular spot for small kids to sled. So anyway, nothing else to report.
Member Palmer,
Nothing to report.
Member Jefferson,
Nothing to report.
Member Waits,
Nothing to report.
Member Miller.
I have nothing to report on my 2 parks, but I do want to give a compliment to the Parks Department for Burns Park, where they had the foresight to close off the speediest slide, because I went down the small one and I damn near killed myself on that thing, because with snow, and then when you're wearing the snow boots, like you hit a velocity like you wouldn't believe. So I'm very grateful that the park department is looking out for old men with arrested development.
Member Stiley,
How do I even follow that? Nothing to report. Mine are just snowy.
all right.
And members of the park board, I will just ask in the future, if you can note the last time you visited your park. I think I don't want to keep doing these if all we're getting is nothing to report. So maybe we can talk about that at the annual meeting if this is something that we want to continue doing. But I'd like us to either, maybe notate the last time you went or something that you observed while you're there, like Vice Chair Slindy and Member Miller. Or if we don't like doing this, this is something that happened before I was here, we can quit doing that, but that would just be my ask.
I think in the past, this was used for bringing up like graffiti on this bench at Burns Park, but I think there's also a lot of open communication via email, where if I see that, I know I can email you. So it might be something worth discussing. I agree with that. Member Waits.
Well, I didn't want to waste a park visit, so I will share that I did go to Valley Park a couple weekends ago, and actually it was the first time that I didn't see, I don't think anybody there at all. None of the tables, benches, or other items in the park were upturned, which was a huge improvement over my usual visits. And I noticed that I did email Peggy Sue about this, but I need to go back because I did not notice where the warming house was. I'm aware that there is one, but I looked at the bathrooms in the building and they were barricaded with a garbage can. So I need to go back because this is just kind of an ongoing project for me with that park because it's always a little bit in disrepair. So that's my report on that.
Member Stiley.
I was just going to say that I think some of the parks are more used at different times of the year. So for instance, I mean, there's not a whole lot we could do with my Central Park. It's in the winter and Elmo is low. Not to identify mine specifically, but I think some of them like Valley or Burns, even in the winter, get a little bit more. So I don't know if maybe there's a seasonal, like I'll give you guys lots of stuff when there's tons of people there, but maybe it's a seasonal question versus like probably a little less activity in the winter.
Member Miller.
It could be something that is just submitted before to add to the agenda so you can read. Maybe we don't actually have time where we go through it, but you could see it as like the bottom, like that's just a place to report. So that way we're still doing it, but it's not taking our meeting time.
Yeah, Member Miller, I like that idea. Perhaps it's something that people send in advance.
All right. Our next park board meeting is on February 28th, 2020. It says at City Hall. Are we still going to be remote at that time, or is that to be determined?
Vice Chair, or Chair Biggins, at this time, the emergency mask mandate ends, February 13th. So, I'm, planning for that meeting to be in person. If the emergency mask order is extended, then we would, deal with that at that time. But, members of the park board should plan to be in person for the February meeting.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Member Waite's motion to adjourn.
And a second?
Second.
I think that was Member Palmer who got that second first, with a third from Member Miller. Do we need to do a roll call to adjourn?
Member Miller,
Aye.
Member Palmer,
Aye.
Member Waits,
Aye.
Member Jefferson,
Aye.
Member Stiley,
Aye.
Vice Chair Slindy,
Aye.
Chair Figgins.
Aye. And it is 7:30 or 8:30. The clock here says 7:30.
It's wrong, and I think they can't figure out how to fix it. I don't know.
Well, the computer says 8:30, so we'll go with that. All right, thanks, everybody.
Bye, gang.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Sorry, text me in the middle saying, did you?